Panel is going to be chaired by Niamh from IoT Horizon. So over to you, Niamh.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? I'd just like to say this is my first, I've been on many panels, but I've never hosted a panel, so you'll have to bear with me. Hopefully, I learned a lot from the previous host, so we'll see how that goes. So yes, this is all about how we can make tech easier for businesses to go greener, and how can we foster collaboration and drive sustainable practices. So I'm Niamh, I'm the MD of IoT Horizon, so we're a full-service smart buildings company, doing exactly what people are doing in their homes and moving it into industrial and commercial premises. We've got a brilliant panel with us today, so we've got Adam from KO Data, we've got Jordan Blunsom from Slalom, we've got Brian Devlin from NatWest, and we've got Hannah Drake from Enerlytic. So at this point, I'll just, if you don't mind, all introducing yourselves, your roles, what you do, and then we'll get into the questions. So if we start with Adam.
So I'm Adam Nethersole. I'm the VP of Marketing at KO Data. We are a large developer of data centers.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan Blunsom. I'm a senior consultant in Slalom's strategy and operations practice, where I focus on end-to-end value chain decarbonisation.
I'm Hannah Drake, founder of Enerlytic. We're an energy monitoring and data insights platform that monitors energy consumption.
So I'm Brian Devlin. I'm a relationship director at NatWest in our corporate banking team. And I also help manage some of our climate-related activities in the Northwest.
So if we get into the questions, so KO Data has achieved pretty impressive net zero figures in your data centres. Could you elaborate on the specific technologies or strategies that have enabled you to get to this, particularly in reducing your Scope 3 emissions?
Yes. So data centers have quite an interesting role to play within technology and sustainability, essentially because data centers, if you think of the pyramid of technology, data centers are that very underlying bottom brick of the pyramid. So this is the whole reason why I joined the data center industry. Because if you can make that bottom layer of the pyramid sustainable, then everything above it has a very good fighting chance of being sustainable as well. For us, we are probably the largest Scope 3 emission for everyone above us. So if we can ensure that everything that we're putting into our data center and anything that comes out of the data center is sustainable, that goes a long way to helping all our customers with their Scope 3 emissions. Internally within the data center, we use a plethora of technology, as you can imagine, to ensure that right down to the smallest details, such as the temperature inside data halls, is the optimum temperature to reduce the amount of energy usage. But I would say a lot of it, to be honest, is just common sense and is just using core brain power to look root and branch at everything that we do, everything that comes into the data center, and making sure that we don't just tick a box by saying we use renewable power. It's by looking at everything else that we do, and even down to the level of how do people travel to the data center, how do our customers travel to the data center, how can we minimize the carbon emissions there.
And can you share the statistic? Was it 97% efficiency? Yeah,
so we as a company, we are part of what's called the Data Center Pact. The 100 largest data centers in Europe are all part of this with an aim to be carbon neutral by 2030. With our measurements, which are all independently done, we're about 97% of the way there. Now, obviously, as a data center company, a large part of that is the power that we use. So we are now having to work very hard to try and find that additional 3%. But we're making good strides towards that.
Brilliant, thank you. So Jordan, so Slalom's focus on sort of business transformation and sustainability is commendable, and we've had great conversations on that. Could you share any success stories where technology-driven transformation has enhanced the sustainability within a company's operations or supply chain?
Yeah, so I think it's important to reflect that organisations have been on their own digital transformations for decades, right? A lot of the companies have invested in different tooling and technologies that give them better visibility across their supply chain and operations, whether it's a big enterprise resource planning platform, a warehouse management system, a PLM software, whatever. I think what we're really seeing now is a lot of companies investing in the ability to synthesize the data that sits across those disparate platforms, to be able to get better insight, to be able to communicate with their supply chain partners, to be able to get insight from their customers on what's working for them to be more efficient, and then obviously to pass that back up the supply chain to reduce inefficiencies, to get a better alignment between supply and demand. All of these things reducing the carbon intensity of the supply chain. So I think, if I look at the manufacturing sector, for instance, where there's a, I think there's a lot of folks here that sit in the built environment sector today. There's a real pressure in the built environment to be more sustainable. You're looking at like environmental product declarations of products, the life cycle assessments of products. All of that is really, really data intensive from across the supply chain. And so I think what we're finding is a lot of companies investing in that tooling, those systems, to be able to get that end-to-end X-ray of their operation to really identify those decarbonisation levers. And we're working with a company in the built environment sector that's been doing just that, really leaning into that LCA process and that environmental product declaration process to help their customers get better data, confidence that they're buying the right products for their projects, and also, therefore, enabling that company to identify weak points in their supply chain, to invest in their suppliers and develop that supply chain.
So do you think the data is already there in companies and it just sits across disparate systems and they're not using them as effectively as they can? Is that something that you go in to understand how businesses are, what data they're already collecting or what data they need to collect to make sure they're sort of on a starting point to that sustainability journey? I
think, yeah, exactly right. I think organisations have a lot more data than they realise. I think that is relevant. I think a lot of organisations can't see the wood for the trees in terms of their own data, and therefore are quick to rush to try and identify source of data outside of their own control without having a real sense of the data that they own and how to govern it and use it more effectively.
Brilliant. So I think it probably would be nice to move on maybe to Hannah at this point, actually, because that's exactly what Enerlytics do. You've got an energy platform which brings in all of that insight data and you make sure clients get the most from that. How does your technology enable businesses to pinpoint these inefficiencies, lead into cost reduction and improve sustainability outcomes?
Yeah, it's like Jordan mentioned earlier, it's having access to that data, and it's what you do with that data. So Enerlytic really tries to make the visibility of data as simple as possible. So looking at what you're consuming at a building level, at a site level, all the way down to equipment. And you can easily see once you start zooming in and looking at each of those different data sets exactly where you are consuming energy, where you shouldn't necessarily be consuming energy. So I guess the behavioural wastage there, but also looking at kind of potential technical inefficiencies, looking at processes. If we work with a number of manufacturing plants, there's equipment there that's being left on or isn't necessarily as efficient as other pieces of equipment that they've got. But without that data, it's very difficult to see. So it's really just having that visibility and making it much more easy to understand. And then once you've got hold of that data, you can understand that data. It's around what you do with that data. It's making more better actions for the business, which will allow you to start reducing consumption. But I think in terms of looking at sustainability, I think there's a lot of investment to become sustainable. But I think when you look at certainly energy consumption, there's so many things that you could do to actually reduce cost, so you can be sustainable and reduce cost at the same time. And it's just having the access to that data, and it's what you can do with that can really drive that forward.
Thank you. Move on to Brian. So Brian works for NatWest, and you've got a carbon planner which has achieved quite considerable recognition. I think last year it won, if I look at this correctly, the most successful environmental project award in 2023. Could you share insights into how this tool is assisting businesses, particularly smaller enterprises, which we've discussed, in navigating the transition towards carbon reduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Niamh. So at NatWest, climate is one of the 3 pillars that underpins absolutely everything that we do. And genuinely, we've kind of looked top to bottom across our business and thought, right, how can we start to decarbonise our own business, help our customers decarbonise their businesses, and also help provide investment to businesses that need it as part of that decarbonisation journey. And the part of the business where I work in, and I guess in the sort of the mid-market, commercial, corporate-sized businesses, we've been having conversations with customers for a number of years about climate. It's there as an agenda item. And in a lot of cases, the feedback we were getting, particularly among kind of SME businesses, is, look, we know it's important, we know we need to do something about it, our customers are bringing it up, our colleagues are bringing it up, we can see that energy is an issue, but we just don't know where to start. And that was the genesis for our tool called Carbon Planner. So it's a desktop application which enables businesses to identify their level of emissions, help develop an action plan as to how you can reduce those emissions, and give them, I guess, some guidance as to practical steps that can follow on from that. So how it works, it's been developed with input from external environmental consultants. We're not the experts in this, but we help deliver it. We use technology to deliver it. And essentially, a business will go onto the site. You don't have to be a NatWest customer. You don't have to pay for it. It's completely free. You go on, you register, you input some data about your business, about your sources of emissions. So it'll be things like your building, your built estate. It'll be things like your supply chain, your energy usage, your waste, the amount of waste you generate, the amount of water you use. The tool then helps give you an estimate of your carbon footprint. It gives you a list of actions that you potentially could take to reduce that footprint, and it will help give you an idea of the specific emission reduction from each action, the costs associated with each action, and also an idea of the payback period. The sorts of things that it might suggest might be things like reviewing your building management system. And I think one of the key things, as Jordan has said, is the more accurate the data businesses have, the more accurate the outputs will be. So I think that's a really important factor. But for most businesses, the feedback we get is that there's probably maybe half a day, maybe up to maybe a couple of days of work goes into to putting the information into the tool, and then from there you can sit down at a business level and decide, okay, what actions do we want to take next? So it's not a solution for everyone. We tend to find it's businesses maybe kind of 10 to 50 million turnover that get the most value from it. It's not the only solution on the market, but for us, for customers where they kind of say we don't know where to start, we're able to kind of say, well, okay, why don't you take a look at this?
So just to pick up on that point then, so that's something we discussed previously, is about once you've helped that client to go through that and identify where there needs to be some improvements, and then as NatWest you can help to look at funding routes. How do you engage with industry and sort of the technology providers that are either in this room or sort of wider afield, sort of solar and in smart homes and monitoring? How do you help them to access other links that are sort of outside of NatWest?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do work in partnership with a number of different organisations in both developing this technology and potentially deploying some of it. So a couple of examples might be we work in partnership with a technology business called Diode, where they are experts in fleet management and emissions reduction. So we can work with companies to look at some of the data that they already hold. So for example, it might be vehicle telematics data, and we can use that to help them come up with some ideas around potentially where they might be able to move to an EV vehicles rather than a conventional fleet. So to give one example.
Lovely. The theme of this panel is also around collaboration, and it's something that we got on a Teams meeting last week to discuss this panel, and very quickly noted that there's a lot of synergy between us all and we could probably work quite well together. How do you see collaboration playing a part in the sector in driving forward technology, and how does technology help to foster that collaboration? And to the floor, whoever would like to pick up first.
Yeah. I think from my perspective, obviously we look at the data, but we don't see ourselves as the solution. I think once you've got hold of the data, there's so much you can do around different solutions that apply to your business, but you don't know what they are until you know where you are as a business. So for us, it's really, really important to collaborate with partners that have that solution, which is the next phase. It's more of like the action, I think. So it's definitely important for us. And I think, we're all here to achieve the same goal. We're not in that space where we're trying to compete against other businesses. I think if we all want to get to net zero, we need to collaborate with other businesses. And I've found that certainly over the last kind of 5 years, organisations are much more open to collaborate with each other, and I think we will only get there if we do collaborate. So I think it's certainly important for us.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think the network effect is huge here. And I think it's really incumbent on organisations to understand what they're trying to do with their decarbonisation journey and be really clear about how they're going to do it while still being able to deliver value, or how they might need to pivot to be able to do it. And once they've identified that, really trying to understand, okay, to do this, then who do I need to engage with? Who do I need to partner with? What investments do I need to make? And really, developing that network, that core of sort of like trusted partners that have got similar goals to go on that journey with. So, for instance, we're partnered with AWS, Microsoft Azure, loads of tech providers. And we work with these platforms to help our customers to move faster, to innovate, etc. So we recently collaborated with AWS to develop a a generative AI bill ingestion tool for a customer so that they could, take their customers' bills, ingest them, and improve the data quality in their platform and the speed to consumption of data onto their platform and speed to insight. So it really does take a village to do this, and it's exciting.
Yeah. I think. Sorry.
No, go on, Brian.
No.
Okay.
I think from our perspective, it becomes a bit of a cliche, but we kind of say climate change it's a team sport. We're not here to be the only provider of solutions. We want to work with others to help provide solutions. I think we were talking just like in the 5 minutes before this about potentially we could make an introduction to someone on our side to talk about the services that you guys provide. And I'm quite happy if there's anybody who thinks I'd like to partner with NatWest, or I've got a business that's got this specific issue, can you help? It's no issue to have a conversation. It's no issue to help try and put you in touch with the right person on our side if that's something we can do. I suppose from our perspective, we do work with a number of partners. For me personally, great if they're based in Manchester. I'd love to see that. We do have, and Hannah's been through this programme, we do have a programme for sort of scale-up businesses in Manchester around our accelerator hub. I know you had a session on accelerators earlier on. So I think that there's a lot of, I suppose that, the door is open. It would be how I'd leave it. We're happy to talk to anyone and see how we can work together.
All I would say, I suppose, and I'd echo everything that the other panelists have said. I think the best thing I heard this morning from somebody was that every innovation that comes brings 20 new problems. And I think you have to tackle this with that mindset, which is that this is not a challenge which we can just tick a box and solve. Within our industry, we're always innovating, but yes, it will create another issue which we then have to find another innovation to solve that innovation. But that's a challenge which I think is in the space.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that across the sector, especially in our industry. We're seeing you have to engage with universities, you have to engage with catapults, funding bodies, large organisations, small organisations. They all have a part to play in that ecosystem. So prior to meeting, obviously, NatWest, I wouldn't necessarily know how to engage with you. So there's somebody here in the room that you can engage with. I think that's it. In this room, our founder was sat, before saying it's so inspiring to be, part of this community that people want to drive it forward. And you can feel the collaboration. I think there's lots of opportunities there. So maybe we'll stick with Adam. So we talked about data centres and the industry changing and how you've seen a shift from years, sort of 10 years ago.
Yeah, completely.
Could you maybe touch on that in terms of what trends you're seeing?
Yes. So this is a good news story, and I think so much of the climate change debate at the moment is essentially bad news continually. I'm obviously not making light of the fact that I realise the mess that we've made ourselves, and we've got a lot of stuff to do to get better and reduce carbon emissions. But if you keep telling people bad news, people will switch off. So this is a good news thing. So 10 years ago, I started in the data center industry. When I started, if we received an RFP from a big bank or a cloud provider, I would say sustainability was probably at about 27, 28, 29 on the list of requirements. It was probably behind, is there a vending machine in the reception? That's the level where we were talking about. Skip forward 10 years now, sustainability is in the top 3, if not the top 2, of every single requirement that we have. So data centers generally need to be very reliable. That's normally the top one. Price, especially with the cost of energy, is always up there. But sustainability now has become an absolute crucial part of an acquisition. It's no longer just a PR piece you stick on a press release. And if you could see the documentation which we get sent from, say, someone like a Microsoft or an Amazon to ratify that the services that we provide are going to be as environmentally friendly as possible, I think generally most people in this room will be quite heartened about that they go to incredible lengths to make sure that the services that we're providing and the Scope 3 emissions that we're accountable for are as green as possible. So that transition has taken 10 years. But it's a massive transition, and it shows that the industry that we are in is underpinned by the right things. So I suppose that's the biggest thing I would say within this debate that I've seen.
Thank you. So Jordan, we talked around the accessibility and the reliability of data. How do you see that making sure that it is accessible and reliable for helping businesses to implement and track green initiatives?
Yeah, it's absolutely vital. I mean, I've used the example before around, working with the built environment client, and I think, you touched on it there around in that sector, there is an existential element to this, right? It is so important because it is so carbon intensive. And so being able to have that visibility of the data and being able to have the technical tooling and skills within your organization to collect that data, collate it, and be able to actually understand and interpret what it means is super important. And I think when we look at this, we perhaps fall into a trap of thinking that I need to just chuck all the money in the world at this to be able to solve it. The beauty of this is that, you know, as Brian says, there are free tools out there that can get organizations moving. You don't need to just go and implement like a big enterprise software. You can, if you're a big enterprise organization, go and implement Net Zero Cloud or whatever. But there are plenty of free resources to start, and leaning into that and going on the journey and understanding how to use that data to drive your own internal initiatives is far more important than just going off the deep end and just chucking loads of money at a problem that you can't really define and don't have the mechanisms to resolve anyway.
So do you adapt your strategies then based on the size of the company? Because we've discussed that you work with very small organisations up to, you know, huge, massive corporations that have very different budgets. How do you manage, I suppose, the budget question? Because it's very different, isn't it? Yeah,
I mean, you know, for a smaller organisation that's just starting out, they may have done some carbon accounting baselining or whatever that has identified the sources of carbon data. We might just build some bespoke dashboards or reporting for them. And like I say, scaling that all the way up to, you know, we've built platforms for customers on, you know, on the cloud to do energy monitoring and analytics, et cetera, to, you know, and then, like I say, all the way up to, you know, big platforms like Net Zero Cloud or whatever, to have that enterprise, you know, scope 1 and 2 view, and then into the supply chain as well.
Thank you. So, Brian, we touched on a nice point around climate change presents both risks and opportunities for both a funder and also a company. So how does NatWest assess the financial implications of climate-related risks and opportunities, repeating myself, and what role does technology play in facilitating this assessment process?
Great, thanks. So I think I always feel a little bit bad when we sort of say opportunities for climate change, because you kind of like, it's a bad thing, but equally, I suppose in this room, people are in business, and, you know, we're not here to kind of sit and mope and say the world's ending, you know, we can do nothing about it. We're all here to kind of learn, innovate, adapt, try and solve the problem, because that's what, you know, that's what business is here to do. I guess, and as a bank, we just want to help enable that. We want to work with, you know, we want to help support businesses on their journey. You know, we've given commitments about, you know, the amount that we want to lend into to that sort of project. But I guess specifically in thinking about how we might assess climate risk, there's probably two easy kind of questions we think about. One is, what is our customers' impact on the climate? And that's a kind of links to some of the things that we've talked about before in terms of the emissions that businesses generate. And we've got different tools like Carbon Planner, like Diode, like AbSolar to help assess the suitability for solar. We've got voltage reduction businesses we're working with. But then I guess one of the other questions we ask is, you know, what is the impact of climate change on our customers? So actually, how are our customers going to have to adapt and mitigate the impacts of climate change? What does it mean from I guess a physical risk perspective? So, you know, are premises more likely to flood? Are supply chains more vulnerable? What does it mean from a regulatory perspective? So, you know some businesses who have had real issues with PRNs. We've got CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. We've got carbon credits that will be an issue for businesses. So a lot of regulatory risk that businesses have to think about. What does it mean from a consumer perspective? You know, will customers still buy your product? Can you still make it in the same way? Are there energy implications? And, you know, I guess over the last couple of years, people who've been banging the drum about reducing emissions have almost, in some quarters, been ignored. And then people realise emissions are linked to energy use, and everyone wants to cut their energy costs, and they think, oh, okay. So steps you can take to reduce your energy usage through investment or efficiencies in your operation are important. So I think, and in managing that sort of climate risk associated with a business's activities, we're kind of looking at some tools internally as to how we assess that, but equally, an awful lot of that just is about talking to people. And, you know, as I said probably at the start of my first question, we're trying to put climate on the agenda with our customers, and it's an ongoing conversation. And as you say, every solution presents a new problem. So it's kind of like, how are you doing with climate? Oh, we haven't thought about it. How are you doing with climate? Well, we tried this, this, and this, but that's led to this, this, and this. And, you know, what do we do next? So it's just trying to continue that conversation. And technology does play a part, and it will continue to play a part in it. But I guess for everyone in this room, you know, you could probably have Googled a lot of the topics you'll hear about today and got 80% of the information. The reason why we talk to our customers is the same reason that you come here, because it's only by talking to each other and networking that we can learn and help to innovate.
Thank you. So Hannah, you've touched on obviously data-driven strategies and how they can help a business. How do you see this evolving now with customers in terms of the industry, the technology? And do you think customers are sort of ready to drive those strategies forward?
Yeah, I think in terms of technology, there's been vast improvements generally. I mean, you just have to take AI as an example. You know, looking at ChatGPT, it's just the answer to everyone's prayers at the moment, I think, for a lot of things. But certainly for how you apply certain technologies, and I think from an energy perspective, you know, looking at what you can do with AI to, I guess, look at further inefficiencies in data, looking at flexible storage, all those sorts of things I think are really important. You know, look at renewable technology, battery storage. There's a lot of different technologies that now that can be applied, and I do actually think we're on the very start of that journey, and I think it's going back to basics and then looking at the different applications that you could apply to energy and to other bits. You know, look at fleets, telematics, all sorts of things that I think that can really benefit. So I think there's a lot that can be done there.
Thank you very much. So I got the 2-minute sign. Do we have time for questions? Does anybody have any questions? Yeah. Well, you get the microphone. He has got I know he has a very loud voice, so should be fine.
30 years ago, I emigrated to Manchester with Hewlett-Packard, and I used to sell storage. Back then, we thought a terabyte was a lot of information, and there's a bank not far from here on Portland Street. You know, we were putting diamond light source drill bits through the walls, the nuclear Faraday cage. We were doing SAP on demand. You know, I went to COP28. I heard some cracking things about. But the one thing I learned was it's down to individuals to make a change. And I think, you know, with data centers, there's a challenge that you want lots of data because you sell more data, right? How do you, one of the things I'm guilty of is I'll get an Excel file and I'll copy it somewhere else because, you know, I just can't remember where I stored it. And then all of a sudden I've got 4 copies. And Cognizant talked about, you know, data strategies. How do you help people, old farts like me, look at how we reduce our data? Because if we all reduced our data by half, it's a huge impact on your industry. And if we did do that, what could we do to the planet? How big could it be?
My word, that is a hell of a question. My word. So I would say that probably in 2 parts, really. So data centers essentially, they aren't built and then essentially we hope that people will put compute inside them. We are, such as the demand for data centers now, I'm being brutally honest with you, we can't build them fast enough. The demand is out there, we are just satisfying that demand. So if people used half of the amount of data that you are using, there's still an enormous amount of data around that our industry needs to cater for. And we haven't even started thinking about AI yet in terms of what that's providing. I think one of the ironies with data as well, especially at the very personal level that you have, is that someone can have, say, 10,000 emails. You actually use less data leaving those 10,000 emails than you would do if you then started deleting them. Because by deleting them, you're actually instigating an action on your computer to delete the emails and create more energy. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's a really tricky one. And I probably haven't got a better answer than that, to be honest with you. How individuals solve their data footprint is something which is exactly what we just talked about, which is that, do you know what, we've created an innovation in terms of AI, we've created innovation in terms of data usage, and as with all human things, after we've created that, we're now thinking about the repercussions of it. All I can suggest from a very top-down view is that if I can make sure that the data center that we are operating is as sustainable as possible, whether you've got 10,000 emails in there or whether you've got 2,000 emails, we can be sure they're being powered by renewable energy and they're not creating a large carbon footprint.
I think we're out of time. Do you want me to get off the stage? We'll go. Thank you very much.
That was a good question.
Brilliant. Thank you, Niamh. Thank you, Niamh. And could we have a special round of applause for Niamh doing her first panel? Flawless. In fact, Niamh, I'm going to